All right. All right. So, hello, everyone. I'm Lily McGarry with Drake and Arts, and with me today, our co-host, Tom McGarry, author Marek Bennett, and I don't think we have an interpreter right now, but maybe she'll join. So Marek is a New Hampshire-based cartoonist, musician, and educator. He leads discovery-based comics workshops for all ages throughout New England and the world beyond. His comics work includes the graphic novel series, The Civil War Diary of Freeman Colby, as well as drawing, translating, he has it, very good, as well as drawing, translating, editing for The Most Costly Journey, perfect, with the bilingual El Viaje project. His crowdfunded cartoon travel memoirs include Sharaja Sketchbook. Do you have this one?
Oh, yes, I do. Right.
Perfect. And Slovakia, Fall in the Heart of Europe.
That we'll have to imagine, I think.
Okay, no worries. Marek is the recipient of the 2021 New Hampshire Governor's Arts Award for Art Education. Marek plays Civil War folk music with the Hardtacks and Hot Gonzo primitive folk jive with the Cold River Ranters. So we love your work, Marek. Is there anything in particular you'd like to share with us? Take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, I better have something to share after an interview like that. Thank you. I feel like I should hold up some object for each thing you mentioned. I guess a banjo, a Civil War style banjo, and I don't know, a ukulele or something. But yeah, thank you. It's nice to have a little meeting here, and I'm excited to share some artwork I haven't been sharing publicly because I've been hard at work on my new book. So I think what I'll do is I'll share. I have a little demo I think we can all do if you have paper and pencil, because I'm a cartoonist and I love cartooning with people. And since this is an arts group, I figured we could give it a try. So I'm going to put on this little camera over my desktop here, and you're looking down at a piece of paper on my desk. And you could, this is nothing fancy. You could use scrap paper or the back of an envelope or a napkin here. We'll do a little doodling together, just as we think about cartooning and comics. And then I will show you some pages and some artwork from the Freeman Colby series. And if anybody has questions about other stuff, we can talk about that. All right. So I guess I've always been a cartoonist, so I'm going to draw myself as a little kid here. So let's see if I can create a little kid. I'm going to do just a quick stick figure, and I'll make it with a really big head, so it looks like it's a really little kid or a space alien or something. I'll make the eyes far apart, and there I am as a little kid, and I'll give myself a little pencil and a great big sketchbook. I have some old sketchbooks that I don't know how I carried them around, but they're great big sketchbooks. And I filled them up with pictures. And ever since even before I could read or write, I was drawing pictures. And I really just love that, right? And what I love, I think now looking back on it, what I love about comics is that, what I love about cartooning is that with a couple lines, I could sort of start a story happening on the page. And often I didn't know what that story was until I started drawing it out, and I could add some imagination into it and turn it into something different just by adding a couple little lines. Things could take a totally different turn very quickly. And I could draw lots of adventures and things in my sketchbooks as a kid. And you can do this too, actually. This is a very accessible art form. I mean, try this. Let's just make a few, not even circles. Make a few roundish shapes here. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 shapes, or we can fill the page with them too. But for now, if you just draw a few shapes and then try making faces in them and keep those faces as simple as possible. Simplest face I know how to draw is like 2 dots on a line. And we'll make it look kind of blank. Although I suppose a slightly simpler face would be if you do 1 dot in a line. Doesn't it kind of look like they're looking to the side there? And then if I do 1 dot in a line over here, it kind of looks like they're looking at each other, right? So I can start getting interactions going on here. And we can try maybe moving the eyes around, making them bigger or smaller. Just try filling up these shapes. Maybe with a curved line here, maybe a curved line here, and just notice the reaction you have to making those lines, right? To going in, try these fancy eyes, circles with dots. It's a very different smile. That's the same curved line, but it's a very different smile from that smile somehow, right? Especially if you make the eyes going in different directions. That's kind of fun. And it's like there's this thing that happens. It's not happening on the paper, right? It's happening in our heads, in our bodies, in our imaginations, in our emotions, when we look at a simple face like this and then give it a different meaning just with a couple lines, right? Try opening the mouth, how about? Or like that. I hear people chuckling, right? Because this is like every kid I've ever worked with knows this so well, that when you start making marks on paper or the wall or anything, you get this reaction. You feel it in your body, and to my mind, like stories are starting to happen. Like this character just told a secret to that character, and they are surprised by it. And this character maybe is involved in it and hopes it's not too bad of a secret or something. You can even hint at, like, maybe they're whispering something, or maybe we can make them saying something, right? Maybe we can open up that mouth and just have them say the first thing that comes to mind, right? And you don't have to have a big plan for a graphic novel series in order to do this kind of cartooning. In fact, these might be 9 characters that all have something to say to each other. So how do we tell the difference between them? Maybe that one has long hair, and maybe this one has pigtails, and maybe this one has a beard, and maybe this one wears a funny hat. And you can just kind of make marks like this and see what happens as you go. And maybe they all live in a house with this cat who draws stories in a sketchbook. And this could be, an idea for a story that we have. And I've always loved this kind of artwork. I actually, several years ago, in the ancient mists of time, I was doing 24-hour comics. And my approach in drawing 24-hour comics, this one I started in October 7th at noon, October 7th, 2006. So my goodness, 16 years ago, I guess. Wow. And my approach to drawing 24-hour comics was I would always come in without any plan. I have to draw a 24-page comic in 24 hours. And I would just kind of bounce off whatever happened during those 24 hours. In this case, it was a beautiful day, and I didn't want to be sitting in the studio drawing at Center for Cartoon Studies, who was hosting this event. So I went out in the street and I started drawing. And everybody that I met on the street there who walked up as I was drawing, I'd just draw them into the story. Or butterflies that flew by, they would become part of the story. And page after page goes by. And by about 2 a.m., I was feeling totally crunched, totally crushed. There I am being crushed by my storytelling, right? And finally I said, I don't have any ideas for stories, and I'm tired of being receptive to what's happening around me. Maybe these last couple stories, I'll just draw whatever I've been reading recently. And I think I was reading Shelby Foote's novelistic treatment of the American Civil War. And I said, but here's the thing, I'm so tired. I've been drawing for 18 hours straight. All I have the attention for is stick figures. Well, let's try this. And within a couple pages, I drew the Battle of Ball's Bluff as a stick figure picture. And it probably took me an hour. I think I have about an hour for each page, an average of an hour for each page. And I remember drawing that page and thinking, wow, I've never understood that battle before. And I've never understood it from the point of view of every person I drew in there. And maybe I still don't, but it helped me imagine a little bit of what it might have been like to be in that situation. So the last 6 or 7 pages of this 24-hour comic are just stick figures and trying to get at the Civil War history there. That's 2006, right? And then I kind of dropped that, and I went about my I went about my life teaching and drawing comics and doing all sorts of playing music and stuff. I'll work a little guitar in here. And then when I got back from, I was in Eastern Europe working on the Slovakia book that Lily mentioned at the beginning there. And when I got back from there, I looked around New England where I live here in New Hampshire, and I said, why don't I do this kind of storytelling, story gathering here in Henniker, in my hometown where I grew up. And now I'm going to switch to, let me stop the share and I'll switch to my sharing my whole screen so I can actually share some files with you. There we go. So let's see, I got some files ready to share. I do have some artwork to do a reading. And at the local historical society, I came across, I didn't find it, it was there on the shelf, but it kind of tumbled out into my hands, this Civil War diary written by a fellow named Freeman Colby, who the only reason I knew him was because there's a road here in town named after him, the road where he was born. And this is a little sample of his handwriting. I actually saw these, I got these scans from the family who still preserve the originals of this. But in the Historical Society, his diary looks like this. And the challenge I set to myself was, oh, could I take maybe just these first two paragraphs? Maybe that's all I'll draw. I'll just do a little couple page comic about this, and it'll serve to get people interested in this storyline. Because hey, I'm a cartoonist and I like drawing history, and I want to know this story a little more. So I went in and I looked around a little, and I could not at all find I could not find a photograph of this guy. And I looked a little bit, but then I said, you know what? It doesn't really matter what he looked like. He could have looked like any of these characters, or I could draw him as a cat or something. The important thing is to start drawing and see what happens as I draw his story and see if it works, see if it feels like it agrees with other stories, right? Like it somehow accords with the history that other people tell too, because that's a good sign that it might be true. So let me give it a try here. So I decided I would just draw Freeman Colby as a stick figure with absolutely no distinguishing characteristics, because a lot of times if you keep a character super simple, the reader can identify with them a little more, right? The moment I draw a mustache on this character, everybody who has a mustache says, hey, that looks like me. And everybody who doesn't have a mustache says, I wish I had a mustache like that. But if I keep it super simple with no distinguishing characteristics other than that I don't call attention at least to distinguishing characteristics. Yes, it's true, he has 2 legs, 2 arms, a roundish head, but I'm not calling attention to that. I'm not trying to. I'm trying, in fact, to draw as little as possible. I did decide that when I drew other stick figures around, I needed some way to make my main character look different. So I added just on a whim one day, I added 4 little hairs to his head. I still have no idea what he looks like. I've never seen a photo of him, and hopefully that looks like my character, right? It doesn't at all look, I don't even mind if it doesn't look like Freeman Colby, because the story isn't about what he looks like. The other thing I had to do in drawing him was I quickly decided, you know what, it was a scene in that 24-hour comic where the New Hampshire soldiers try to trick a Virginia family into not reporting them by claiming to be Confederate soldiers. And one of the daughters in the Virginia family says, how come your belt buckle says US if you're Confederate soldiers? And having to draw a belt buckle on a stick figure was such a ridiculous exercise that I decided, you know what, I can't do these stick figures just super simple like this. I have to at least give them like a little bit of a shape to their body so that I can then show how many buttons they have, which helps you determine their rank, or I can then show if they're wearing a belt and a belt buckle, right? And their cartridge box on their belt. And I can start getting at the details. You know, I could have gone even further and said, let's give them sleeves and legs. And now they need like cartoon hands and feet, and what are they going to wear on their feet? And there on into the details. I have to do some research, right? Did they have Velcro sneakers? No. Did they have boots, shoes, sandals? Nothing. I have to do some research for that. So maybe I'll keep it super simple and just let them be stick figures with triangle bodies so I can do a little bit of research and then focus on drawing the story. All right, but when I draw them in color, of course, when I draw Freeman Colby in color, I have to draw him with more detail so that I can actually color in his sleeves and his pant legs, but I can always hide his feet in the grass if I'm not sure what he was wearing for shoes, right? There's lots of little shortcuts. As cartoonists, we can get away with. Maybe as a figure painter, I might not be able to get away with that all the time. Let's see. So where were we? Ah, yes, when the war broke out. What a start to a diary, right? So then thinking in cartoons, I realized this is a long story. I want to tell this story and give it some time to breathe over many pages. I'm not going to try to squeeze it into just one picture. You can't tell a life story in one picture, of course, or maybe you can, but I didn't know how to do it. That's beyond my powers. I'm going to draw lots and lots of pictures. So I made some little boxes on the page and I came up with, let's see, I'll just show you the first couple pages. These are the pages that that got me into this project, that hooked me on Freeman Colby as a person, as a storyteller, as a character, and that got me interested enough to draw the first few pages. And that's what got me interested enough to draw the next few. And well, it's been 10 years I've been working on this story. This was, I drew these, I guess, at the end of 2012, not knowing my character, not knowing what I was getting into. So the words are Freeman Colby's, the little doodle stick figures, tentative at first, are mine. When the war broke out, I don't know what he's imagining there, so maybe just a shell burst. I was at home helping my father with the work of the farm. Notice he doesn't say what the work of the farm is, so my challenge as an artist is what's my best guess as to what was going on these farms. There are some pictures of Henniker farms of the time or from a little while after, so I can make a guess they had probably oxen. I was then just turned 21, and most of my time after finishing school, which was like high school at the time. Notice how my Freeman Colby character, the shape of his head is changing each panel because I'm getting to know him here. I made a decision when I finished this book, 350 pages later, I could have gone back and started redrawing page 1 and 2 to bring it into line with page 350. But I kind of like how this comic, it's so simple. You get to see the characters grow and change as we learn the story. Most of my time after finishing school had been spent there on the farm or at school teaching. And knowing Freeman Colby's sense of humor, I tried to line up the actions of these two panels because, well, here's what teaching was like for him. He was a substitute teacher in the public schools in Henniker. At keeping a school, I had had good success. And in schools where there were many scholars older and larger than myself, I had never failed to keep order. And just consider that. Many of the scholars, the students in the school, were older than 20 years old and larger than myself, whatever size Freeman Colby was. I had never failed to keep order. And several times I had finished the terms of teachers who had left their schoolrooms by the windows. And as I tried to be just as well as strict, my services were in demand. Corporal punishment was very much encouraged among school teachers in 1861. Particularly, at least in Henniker, particularly in districts where each winter term was expected to commence with a set-to between the master and a half dozen or more of husky lads whose muscles were toughened by the use of scythe, flail, and axe. These are tough kids, they're strong kids, they're bigger than him. They've just come from working on the farm and they I get the feeling they kind of come into school just to have some entertainment, right? Let's go into school and beat up that teacher guy. And whose ideas of independence would not permit them to learn of one who could be either frightened or licked. Maybe that's the game. Let's go into school and see how much we can scare the teacher. Let's see if we can get him to jump out of the window again. That was so funny. There, the master, and not the scholars, had to stand being hazed. Get to work, boys. but I was anxious to get some opening that promised better returns. Yeah, so where do you go when teaching is too violent and dangerous, when the kids are too rough, where you can't get any respect? In 1862, where do you go? Of course, he's going to join the army and go fight in the Civil War. I don't know if he's being humorous here. I do know that when I draw this character now, notice how he wiggles his little teacher pointer at the end of that second panel there that we're looking at. That's not something that I thought of thinking, oh, that'll be good. That'll really show this or that. That's something that as I drew it, that character kind of does that. Because he's like, okay, you want to fight? I will face you down. I am not scared of you. And this is telling us Freeman Colby's opening his Civil War story with this kind of a setting, because he's telling us who he is and what to expect when he encounters a mean officer, right? Or even worse, the block of Massachusetts men in his regiment. He does say, with the bombardment of Fort Sumter, the whole North awoke with a shock to the existence of war. But few of even the best informed men dreamed of how relentless and long drawn out that struggle was to be. Even the president, in his calls for volunteers, only specified 30 days as the length of service. And that little poster at the very end is actually a poster that hangs today in the Tucker Free Library here in Henniker, in Freeman Colby's hometown. They have a Civil War poster I've walked by all my life. And when I drew this, I thought, let me go get the wording of that. I believe it came from that. There are a couple posters in this that might be from a New Hampshire Historical Society poster. But I try to work in all the little bits and pieces that are around us in the community here and that Freeman Colby might have seen then. So I'm going to jump here. We can, if you want, there are some great stories of his time. He joins the 39th Massachusetts Regiment in August 1862, which is sort of, the war is really ramping up in a different way. This is the same time that Lincoln is first drafting the Emancipation Proclamation, what would become the Emancipation Proclamation, right? And he joins then, not really knowing, he signs up for, I believe, a 3-year term. He's not really sure what's going to happen. Of course, he doesn't know what's going to happen. We know because we can read the history books, but he has no idea what's going to happen in the coming months. Volume 1 documents basically his fall, 1862 into almost spring, 1863, with the 39th Massachusetts. And then volume 2, which I published in 2019, that takes him through the entire year. I kind of cycle back to January, and it's 12 months of 1863. And the thing to know there is, after a year in the service, Freeman Colby ends up in the hospitals in Washington, D.C. And here he is sleeping in a bed among other patients in a hospital in the city. He's actually at Carver Hospital, but because I don't have a lot of his letters there, I've turned to another New Hampshire native, Nurse Sarah Lowe, who you see right here getting medicine ready. And her letters, she wrote a lot of letters from Armory Square Hospital in Washington, D.C. And they're all archived in the New Hampshire Historical Society in Concord. So I realized when I did not have the full story from Freeman Colby, because there's a lot of gaps in his letters, I could turn to people like Sarah Lowe or other people in the hospitals that he might have met. And I could tell their stories and have him sort of in the background. And that's how I fill in the gaps in Freeman Colby's story, by inviting other people to take the stage here. And actually that's really validated when we get into his letters from 1864. So here is a picture. I love this picture. This is a famous picture from the National Archives. And I've seen it attributed, some archives say it's Carver Hospital. Some archives actually say it's Armory Square Hospital. And I can't tell which it is. Maybe an expert could tell, but it's not super important to me right now because a lot of the wards look like this. It could have been Armory Square, it could have been Carver. The thing that I notice is the group of people in here. And every single one of them had a story like or equivalent to or totally unlike, but on the same scale as Freeman Colby, and had a life story that brought them here. And if this really is Carver Hospital, it is possible that Freeman Colby is in this picture. Right? Look around at any one of these people. My own personal favorite theory is that it's this guy, this stern looking guy who actually looks a little like my stick figure who's reading over here. Because Nurse Sarah Lowe writes about how she went around and rounded up all the former teachers among the patients in these hospitals and got them teaching classes to the other soldiers who were recovering here. So I actually, in volume 2, I drew Freeman Colby starting to teach some of Nurse Sarah Lowe's classes. And I wasn't sure if he did or not, but I figured he might have. And then, actually, let me show you. We'll actually get into 1864 and some of the pages from volume 3, the new book that I want to show you. And I'm hoping that the new book will be coming out, fingers crossed, it'll be ready by spring or summer, and I'll do it through a Kickstarter. This is all done, all this research and all this artwork is done independently. It's supported by readers and arts folk like you folks. So thanks for having this reading. This is the first letter that I have from the family, transcribed, of course, for 1864, and it's February 2nd. And the first thing I noticed, he says, "My dear mother, I'm glad for once you have found an opportunity of writing to me." He's a little piqued at the start. "I'm glad for once you have found an opportunity of writing to me. Hint, hint, write more, please. I received your kind letter yesterday. Perhaps it is foolish of me to write so often, but I am so lonesome. But I have found a method of busying myself evenings, which perhaps Willard and Uncle Robert might laugh at." So he's going to tell a little story of something he's starting to do here. I love that he's kind of needling his mom for finding an opportunity to write. And I notice he says, "Perhaps it is foolish for me to write so often." Well, how often was he writing? February 2nd is my first letter that we have in the archive, at least from 1864, that I'm aware of. So how many letters are we missing? How many stories are we missing here? So that's in some ways, I'm glad we have those gaps, because then I have to go looking for stories, and we find photos like this. This is Camp Carver, I think near Carver Hospital, but I'm not sure. And these were recovery tents for surplus patients. At times there were way more injured, wounded, sick men than could be accommodated in the hospitals. There were over 10,000, I believe, at certain times in and around Washington City. And I love crawling into these old photographs and looking at the faces. Again, Freeman Colby could be in this picture, we don't know. And then there are guys standing up on the roof there who have climbed up there to be in the picture of this bigger hospital building. So this, and there's a flag over all of it on the flagpole. So I crawl around in these pictures, and then when I come out of them, I might have some ideas. I might be able to cartoon a little bit of Freeman Colby's letter. Again, putting simple stick figure cartoons to the words and trying to bring it to life in some way that makes more sense than the letter itself, or more sense than the picture itself. Not that this is what Freeman Colby looked like as he wrote the letter. I have no idea about that, but in some way it helps me make sense of the letter. And here's what he tells us in that letter. February 2nd, 1864, Carver Hospital, Washington, D.C. "My dear mother, I received your kind letter yesterday. I'm glad for once," little squiggle of ire, "you have found time to write to me." I'm trying not to play up maybe the sarcasm that he's actually feeling there, because he can look up from writing his page and look around and maybe not feel so bad for himself. These are all figures taken from that photograph we just looked at, but I'm spreading them out, setting them side by side, trying to make it a little clearer to see the details. Anytime I can, I draw a cat into the hospital scene, because Nurse Sarah Lowe writes about the cats in her letter. She has a wonderful passage about hospital cats. So I love that detail, and hospital rats too. They were kind of both served a purpose. And I love those details and having that present in the artwork, hints at other stories. Well, perhaps it is foolish for me to write so often. I imagine the coughing and hacking and wheezing and moaning all around him at night. But I am so lonesome, surrounded by all these fellow patients, but also so lonesome. But I have lately found a method of busying myself, which being Democrats, Willard and Uncle Robert might laugh at. So I added in being Democrats because that's actually, I think those uncles were the Democrats of the family. I believe they were up in Bradford, the next town over. And they didn't agree with Freeman Colby politically at all, and also criticized the war effort too, while he's off fighting it. So they were sort of foils that he would use in his letters, and they would laugh at this. Some days ago, Commissary Sergeant Hilton happened to see, I have no idea who Commissary Sergeant Hilton was. I haven't found a photo of him. But I like drawing the elaborate mustache that he wears in the book, at least. He happened to see an old Negro trying to read the Bible to his colored brethren. Aha. He's sounding out words, maybe making a go of it. But of course, literacy was outlawed in Virginia had been for years, right? For enslaved people. As Frederick Douglass relates, it was very dangerous for enslaved people to learn to read or for anybody to teach them. So this fellow maybe had some rudimentary literacy, but he's having trouble. He's trying to read the Bible to these other men who have probably escaped from slavery themselves and are now working in the hospital, helping men like Freeman Colby recover. So Commissary Sergeant Hilton, it's implied in the letter, comes and gets, well, one of the teachers who's a patient. That's Freeman Colby. He runs and gets him. They run back. We propose to hold an evening school for them. And they're receptive to that. The class met last night for the first time in a ward where they live. So they all live at the hospital there, probably some families. And this gives me an invitation to, we can, in some letters and stories, we can go visit what was called the Friedman Village, the refugee communities around Washington, where formerly enslaved people were putting their lives together and starting to build houses and starting to find work on their own terms. So here, Freeman Colby gets involved in the hospital ward, and that text comes right out of his letter, but he doesn't really describe what the ward is like. So I'm going in and finding pictures. Oh, we'll come back to that tent picture. First, let's see what he tells us about these students. Out of 20 of them, one can say the first line of the ×2 multiplication tables. So this is how Freeman Colby, the teacher, evaluates possible students. But they cannot tell how much 4 oranges would come to at 3 cents each. 4 of the lot can count to 100. 6 can read in words of 3 or 4 letters. I imagine maybe that the older guy who was trying to sound out the Bible. 12 know the alphabet. 8 know next to nothing, at least of books. But a more earnest set of scholars never got together for the same purpose. So just imagine these lifelines, these stories that are intersecting here, right? Freeman Colby, who's tired of fighting with his students in Henniker, New Hampshire, joins a Massachusetts regiment, ends up down in Washington, D.C. These fellows could have come from Virginia. They could have come from Maryland. I'm assuming they're freedmen, meaning formerly enslaved, and they found work in the war effort at the hospital at a time when they were just starting to be able to enlist in the US colored troops, African-American regiments, right? But they're so interested in reading and being able to read the Bible and make sense of history through that and make sense of life through that system and that written record, that they are the more earnest set of scholars, the most earnest set of scholars that this young teacher has ever encountered. I wanted to go into the city today. See, Carver Hospital's a little outside the city, but he's nearby. I wanted to go into the city today to get them some small arithmetic books, the kind with the tables in them. Of course, as I cartoon this, I have to now go research what arithmetic books looked like at the time and how math was taught. And it's pretty fascinating. I love the teaching materials of the time. but it is dull today, so I know the doctor will not give me a pass. Nurse Lowe there is with Dr. Bliss, who was the doctor of Armory Square Hospital at the time. The sergeant spoke to one of the hospital women yesterday, and she says she will have a tent put up for a schoolroom. And who's going to put up the tent? Well, not Nurse Sarah Lowe and not the sergeant. I'm assuming these guys who want to have the class are going to be the ones to put up the tent. And I'm not sure how they erected these tents, but if I have to show it in a single panel, I'll do my best. I do know how Freeman Colby put up his tents because he describes it in his letters. Here he doesn't describe it, but that's the same tent that we saw in rows in that photograph that we saw earlier. And then he says in his letter, this is what the hospital lady said. So I'll just have Nurse Sarah Lowe say it. Oh yes, such a school has been talked of before, but no one seems to want to engage in the enterprise. So here we go, you know, this guy that Freeman Colby that I started following just because he came from my hometown, he happens to be the one person in the hospital who says, hey, let's get some people together here and teach these formerly enslaved people to read, right? And what stories is he then going to encounter and how will they tell their life stories? That's an invitation again to us cartoonists to explore those stories, learn some of them, and bring their voices in. I think last page from this letter, I think this school of ours may be the means of bettering them very much. So those tents had stoves in them, and they set them up and they live with their families. He gives us that clue. So I'm assuming there are women and children also here at the hospital who may take part in these classes. And he also says to his family, I'm glad to read Sis is also going to school. I hope she will improve her time to the best advantage. And I love that juxtaposition of a New England Yankee who knows nothing of slavery and knows very little of the world other than his little roots around these towns here in New Hampshire, going down and getting this education from his students, and then sending a bit of that perspective back home and saying, hey, sis, younger sister, you know, do your best in school. Take advantage of this opportunity you have. But he gets into more details about the food they get. Then the next piece that I like to add in is, what else can we say about the times? He mentions in his PS, he says, what do you think about, what will Henniker folks think about the new draft quota? And I imagine him maybe doing his chores around the hospital, sweeping up and finding crumpled up a draft poster for 200,000 more men. That was what the call that went out at this time as he wrote this letter. And he says, what will, P.S. he adds to his letter, what will Henniker folks think about the new draft quota, thanks to the president? So he seems to be a little resentful of Abraham Lincoln pushing for more recruitment in early 1864. And my next question is, how does this affect maybe his students? So this is my conjecture and my imagination. I imagine one of his students coming to the tent, walking to the school tent where they're doing classes, and maybe sitting down and starting to read. I'm going to grab a book here I have on my other desk. I just realized I have the source for this picture here in a book. And what does he read? Well, there's a passage I love from Harper's Weekly around this time, a little after this time actually, where they say, the alphabet is an abolitionist, but maybe this student with his newfound literary powers could sound that out and start to see that this idea represented in the media of the time. The alphabet is an abolitionist, starting to put the words together and realize that there are these arguments out there. If you would keep a people enslaved, refuse to teach them to read. So says Harper's a little after this time. Now, if you know your Civil War painting, there's no reason you would recognize this fellow that I drew as a student here. But actually, I have here I have the Civil War and American Art, which was published by the Smithsonian. And they have a full page painting of Eastman Johnson's painting, The Lord is My Shepherd. which I believe is 1864, 65. And it's a painting of a man who may be a Union soldier, maybe not. So this is later in the war. He has a blue coat and he's sitting by the fire. The fire is almost out and he's picked up the Bible and he's starting to read the Bible, but he's starting from the beginning of the Bible. And he has strong field worker hands, but he is opening this book and maybe sounding it out, maybe starting to read with, maybe he learned from a New England teacher as the war went on. So I took some of the details of this character, the way he's bundled up, the way he holds the book, the way he's gathered in the darkness by the fire, right? Alone, reading with a light shining on him. And I thought, well, you know, I can use that in this. Maybe the fire's almost gone out in the teaching tent and Freeman Colby staying late with a student who wants to learn because he wants to read these texts about what's going on in the wider world beyond this tent and this hospital. And then, of course, the next step is taking those newfound literary skills into a late night session where now we'll go back to those people that Freeman Colby's only hinting at. And maybe they're reading, maybe they're finding passages in the Bible that tell them, that give them the messages that they are looking for. Art thou called a slave? Care not for it. But if thou may be made free, use it. And if this guy has a chance to learn to read and he learns to read, he can now read that poster. And that's going to tie in towards the end of the book, Freeman Colby's story and the story of these students and the first regiments to fight in battle against the South in Virginia start to intersect. And that becomes some of the battle stories, some of the combat represented later in the book. So a lot of different sources, a lot of different. Oh, actually, I'll just show this. The next couple pages I chose here to show. Of course, in Freeman Colby's regiment out in the field, the soldiers there are taking classes to learn to read also. So this is a little passage. Oh yeah, I'll read these 3 pages because this is nice. This shows the educational atmosphere in the regiment in winter camp down at the front lines of this Massachusetts regiment. So these are Yankee guys all together in camp. And Lieutenant Colonel Pearson, who was a really inspirational leader, in February, he offers a gold pen and case to the man who gains the greatest proficiency in writing. They had sort of a remedial class for all the men who couldn't read and write, and they knew because they couldn't sign their name and their enlistment papers. They sent them to this reading and writing class. They said, you don't have to go to firewood duty, you go do your reading class. And they kind of won them over, got them into class that way. So the one who gains greatest proficiency wins a gold pen and case. Gold pen and case? I think that gets their attention. All written exercises are carefully preserved, but when the time comes to award the prize, Pearson finds it difficult to say who has improved more. And I just love drawing these stick figures of these tough guys who are like out living in tents all winter long, cutting the firewood, about to fight the rebels in battle. You know, they're tough guys, but I imagine them all on the edge of their seats like, oh, please choose my writing exercise, please choose. So how's he going to choose? It comes down to 2 finalists. Johnny Gibbs of Company A, a bricklayer from South Danvers, getting along in years, age 44, which was how old I was when I drew this page, thinking getting along in years. Years of clasping a hand trowel have deformed his right hand. His handwriting is characteristic, but easy to read. I imagine this guy is used to using a hand trowel to lay bricks. He must have like brick-like writing, just square letters or something. And Daniel Lyons, Company H. He's a carriage painter from Dorchester. He can paint whatever he wishes with a fine camel hair brush. No doubt the most artistic and beautiful handwriting in the school. Okay, so who has improved more? This guy with his deformed hand whose handwriting is strange but easy to read, or this fine artist who spent his life painting dancing lines on carriages, and has the most beautiful handwriting. Well, all are puzzled. Which has gained the greater proficiency? So Lieutenant Colonel Pearson says, I can't decide, men. I suggest we draw lots. And the lot falls to, I like the crooked hand reaching for a straw. I think they drew straws. Johnny Gibbs, huzzah! So the old man, the old 44-year-old man wins the golden pen case. And that, oh, there's my little credit there in the corner. That story comes from the 39th Regiment Massachusetts Volunteers, Rose Regimental History from 1914, page 149. So these things, I believe these things actually happened. They're in the archives, they're in the letters, and I really love having the job of going in and figuring out what they may have looked like. I'll show you one more 2-page spread that I really, oh, 2 more 2-page spreads here. I'm looking for the surprises. The things that I didn't know were in the history. I tell my students, if I draw a page and I haven't surprised myself in some way and discovered something, then I probably didn't do my job, right? Because every page I want to discover something new and be surprised. So I found this little passage. I was troubled by how a lot of the letters that soldiers write home don't necessarily walk you through step by step their day. They might share some details about a day, especially around the battles, but they don't necessarily tell a step-by-step story. But I found this in Theodore Lyman's diary. He was, I believe, he was from around Boston. He was a staff officer. And he wrote, a warm, clear night. This is the day before the Battle of the Wilderness, marching into battle. We all are awake by starlight, and we're marching by daybreak. The road is crowded with wagons and troops, because of course the artillery and the supplies would move by the road, and the troops would have to go along the sides. The roadside is full of violets. So there's just a carpet of violets along the side of the road in May in Virginia. Oops. And of course, he doesn't say this, but they're stomping. They're marching over those violets on their way into battle. The leaves of the trees are just beginning to unfold, about the size of a mouse's ear, perhaps. Love that attention to detail as he's heading into this calamitous scene. And maybe we'll just let those leaves and those stomping feet march into the forest for a moment, and then the battle begins. And a lot of this book, a lot of volume 3 is about half the book takes place over only a couple of days, as I try to reconstruct when you have a letter that says, you know, we fought all day and advanced 2 miles, and that's the only detail it gives. I'm trying to reconstruct what that means, like what happens in that time and what may have been seen and experienced on some level. Those details are out there, but you have to kind of assemble them from lots of different sources. And one of the sources I'm using, here they are, here's the regiment or part of the regiment, a few companies on the point of being sent in. They're in reserve, they're about to be sent over that hill and into they don't know what, but they're about to find out. And a lot of these pictures, I don't trust myself to imagine it because I've never had to march over that hill with 1,000 other people, to meet 1,000 other people coming the other way. A lot of that comes from the sketchbooks of artists like Alfred Woad, who actually sketched this sketch he called Bernie Awaiting Orders to Advance. There it is, Bernie Awaiting Orders to Advance. And this he did on the 5th of May. So he was there right near Freeman Colby, and he's drawing. You can actually see it's even less than stick figures. They're scribble figures, but you can see the legs and arms and heads of the men as they lie on the ground, and their officers stand over them, awaiting orders to advance, and they're about to go up and over that hill. So then I take a quick sketchbook page like that, done in the heat of battle, and it occurs to me this could be a bush, or it could be, sometimes you get cannonballs striking in these sketches. landing on the ground around them if they were actually under fire at the time. And that I can go in and assemble those details then and try to figure out what that looked like, at least from the point of view of someone who was there. That's what the artists of the time are showing us. So it is 250. I have a lot of pages that I love to show, but that's maybe I'll stop there for today. And do we have some comments or questions? Does anybody have anything that
creative process, how you add and then remove things to make it just enough? So to me, that was fascinating. But does anybody else have a question or a comment?
Hi, Marek, it's Liz. I'm just curious. So I noticed at the very beginning, you said that Freeman Colby changed just a little bit until you kind of set on, the essential characteristics you wanted to maintain. As you continued drawing, was it difficult not to try to change what he looked like or what his characteristics were?
Yeah, we just had, I just had a great student question that got me thinking about that just a week or two ago. It's on some levels, I do try to keep him the same. Where's I can show you, I have a proof copy from volume 3 here where I'm testing out different pages. And I'll show you, I just think of this immediately. I have him witness a speech out the White House window by Abraham Lincoln. Again, a speculative concept. I don't know if he ever actually did that, but hey, he's walking around Washington, D.C., and Lincoln was making these speeches out the window sometimes. So, I mean, look at this. Here's Freeman Colby walking along. He's got nice long legs. He's almost the height of a panel. And then a couple pages later, when I drew him, look how short his legs are here. And his head's a little bigger, right? That kind of bothers me a little, but it's not top of my list for how to finish the book and make the book work. So I'm leaving it for now, and I could fix it, but it's also, I think the way he changes, his head gets bigger when he's really thinking. He looks a little more childlike when he realizes he doesn't have all the answers. When he's walking around feeling kind of full of himself, well, meeting a senator from New Hampshire, he looks a little more tall and stern and adult-like. And I'm comfortable with that. I think that's showing, like I started out saying, Freeman Colby did not look like this. Guaranteed he didn't have a big round head with 4 hairs on the forehead. So I'm not trying to draw what he looks like. I'm trying to capture his body language and his emotion and his determination coming to this Lincoln speech and walking away feeling totally different. I love this speech, by the way. As I work on every piece of this book, it just seems more and more relevant. Lincoln saying, we have 2 different and incompatible things called by the same name, liberty, right? For some, liberty means for each to do as he pleases with himself and the products of his labor, while with others, liberty means to do as they please with other men and the products of other men's labors. And he's trying to reconcile that the liberty of the sheep is not the liberty of the wolf. And he has to make a decision. And he finally says, the wolf's dictionary, meaning the wolf's definition of liberty, will be repudiated in this war. Such a poetic idea to be sort of tossing out to a crowd in the streets, right? And I think that gives Freeman Colby something to think about and sort of puts him back in his place, that he's not feeling like he was when he was marching around meeting generals and senators. He's suddenly put back into maybe reconsidering things. So that just comes to mind immediately. I think when I started out, I was just trying to figure out, is his head oval or circular? And now I'm totally comfortable with the fact that every time I draw him, he's a little different. Every time we see our friends in real life, we're all a little different. We stand a little taller, stand a little shorter. And over time, the main thing is that they're all the same character. If you believe that, if I give you the right details, hopefully you'll see them all as the same character and you'll see that continuity. But it's no more, they're actually different pictures and different panels. So so I'm comfortable with them changing a little bit. There are some times where I do, if I need the panel to look just the same, I might trace. That's my little cheat if it needs to look exactly the same. But I try not to do that because I want every panel to be kind of alive and on its own terms. Yeah.
Well,
oh, so the question that came up from one of my students, we were talking about this on the Patreon. I think I posted this. I was at a school, the Wells School in Peterborough here, and oh no, maybe I'm forgetting what school it was, but one of the students said, how do you draw, Abraham Lincoln's beard, and what's the deal with the mustaches and the beards we see in these photos? How would you draw those on stick figures? Oh, this was in Hillsborough, the next town over. And we started talking and drawing some demonstrations. And I realized as we talked, we said, wait a minute, Freeman Colby, when he's camping and then running from battlefield to battlefield, he's not shaving. So why am I drawing him clean shaven? Like, should he, over the course of the book, grow some beard? Or at least like a 5 o'clock shadow or something? And I actually tried drawing him a couple times like that. And I realized that's really going to change how he looks. That's a tool I might use at some point in the war to show how things are changing. But I don't know. I'm sure he wasn't shaving for a week or more because he was in combat for over 10 days straight, I think, in the wilderness in Spotsylvania. He says in his letter. So they didn't even have their backpacks or anything, So I've tried it a couple times and I realized if I start changing my character in the middle of the story, it might get distracting. So I'm not going to try it in volume 3, but it's possible it's a tool we'll have to use in volume 4 as the war continues to go down this path.
I want to mention in the chat, Kathy Torrey mentions or says, thanks, Marek, I have enjoyed your process and your stories. And if she's on, maybe she can say a bit more. So we have time for just 1 or 2 questions. If anybody else has a question or a comment.
Very quick, 1-minute question.
Oh, did you have one, Lily? Or
no, I was saying we have like 1 minute left.
oh, okay.
Actually, I did have one. If no one else has asked, I will ask. When you start writing the story, you said how it's like it changes a little bit with the drawing. Did you read through all of it before you drew it, or did you kind of read a piece, draw a piece, and go like that?
When I started, I didn't read the whole diary because I didn't think I was going to draw it. I just thought I'll draw this first paragraph or 2. And then I did skim through and I thought, this is interesting. I could do like a little 40, 50 page book. I'll just cherry pick the cool parts and leave out all the dull stuff about making camp and having diarrhea, and who wants to read that? And then once I got into it, I realized, oh, who am I kidding? Who am I to say, Freeman Colby, that's not important. This is important. That's not. So I just need to believe in him as a storyteller, as a witness to history, and do every detail that he includes and leave out the stuff he leaves out. That was my approach in volume 1. So I ended up reading the whole thing and kind of marking it up with a pencil, a copy of it. And then in volume 2, I realized he's not telling the whole story. He's leaving out parts he doesn't want or doesn't even know are part of the story. And our job as people looking back at this history is not necessarily just to tell it the way he told it, but to use our perspective we have to say, who else needs to be in this story? So I almost turned around, 180 degrees and said, no, I can't believe him as a narrator. I have a responsibility to go beyond what he says, to take it at face value, but also to make sure other stories are part of it. So that's evolving as I go. I'm learning each page I have to learn something new that changes how I'm thinking about the story, or else I'm not doing my job as a cartoonist. So I should before we end, I want to thank all the schools that have hosted these programs and Drake at Arts for hosting this reading, and especially my patrons who have joined the Patreon. And I'll put my website in the chat so that people can find that. I'm posting these, I need to not talk as I type my website name. There we go. I'm posting the new pages as I work on them. I'm putting them up on the Patreon, and you can join at any level there and see the advanced pages and get all the updates and invites too.
Wonderful. Thank you. We
Yeah,
should
thank-
also do our wrapping up. Thank you so much for being here. It's been really cool listening to your creative process and seeing all the different pages and going through with the character. We also would like to thank all of our sponsors. And here we have a list of them. We are sponsored by Marianne Goldman, Lois Welber, Blue Shutters Web Design, Anonymous, and the Massachusetts Cultural Councils. So thank you to everyone, and thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming, folks. Bye, Liz. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Toby.